No one walks into a library after 11 p.m. unless they're hiding from something or someone. Emily Carter says it under her breath as the wall clock clicks past 11:07, the sound echoing louder than it should in the empty building. The fluorescent lights humming softly above rows of untouched books, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until your own thoughts feel too loud. And she shifts behind the front desk, tugging the sleeves of her thrifted sweater down over her cold hands, trying to stay awake after a 10-hour day split between shelving returns and covering for a coworker who quit without notice because rent is due in 3 days and her savings account reads less than $50, because this late-night shift pays an extra $2 an hour, and right now that feels like survival money. And she glances at the security monitor again just to prove to herself the building is still empty, still safe, still predictable, until the front door creaks open, slow, deliberate, the sound slicing clean through the silence, and she freezes, breath catching for half a second before she looks up, because no one is supposed to come in this late. Not unless they have a reason, not unless they're desperate or lost, and the man who steps inside looks like both, his coat damp from the cold night air, dark hair slightly disheveled, eyes scanning the room not with curiosity, but with something heavier, something tired, like he's been carrying too much for too long. And for a moment neither of them speaks, just the low buzz of lights and the distant tick of the clock filling the space between them. And then he walks forward, slow, careful, like he doesn't want to disturb anything, and stops at the desk, his voice quiet when he finally speaks. "Do you have a book?" It's called The Last Harbor, and Emily frowns slightly, fingers already moving across the outdated computer system, typing, searching, waiting, the screen flickering back nothing, no record, no listing, no trace. And she shakes her head softly. "It's not in our system," she says, watching. His expression tightened just slightly, not frustration, more like disappointment he was expecting, and something about that look, about the way he doesn't argue, doesn't push, makes her hesitate, makes her glance toward the dark aisles behind her, toward the section where older, unregistered donations sometimes end up forgotten, and she exhales slowly, lowering her voice. "We close in 20 minutes, but you can check the back shelves if you want." Even though that's not policy, even though she's not supposed to let anyone wander unsupervised this late, even though she knows better, but something in his eyes doesn't feel like a threat. It feels like someone who just needs a place to breathe. And for a brief second, as he nods and steps past her into the quiet maze of books, Emily doesn't realize she just broke the only rule she had left to keep her life under control, and she definitely doesn't realize the man she just let in isn't lost at all. Emily watches the shadow of the man disappear between the tall shelves, her fingers resting still on the edge of the desk as the seconds stretch longer than they should. The quiet somehow heavier now that she is not alone, and she glances back at the clock, 11:12 p.m., reminding herself she only has a few minutes before she is supposed to lock up, but her feet do not move, not yet, because something about him feels unfinished, like a sentence that stopped in the middle, and she exhales slowly. Before stepping out from behind the desk, her shoes barely making a sound against the worn carpet as she walks toward the back section, past rows of forgotten paperbacks and outdated encyclopedias, until she spots him standing still near the far corner, his hand hovering over a shelf as if he is not really searching, just thinking. And for a moment she considers turning back, letting him have his silence. But instead she clears her throat softly. "You probably will not find it there," she says, her voice quieter now, almost matching the stillness around them. And he turns slightly, just enough for her to see his expression soften, not surprised, not annoyed, just aware. "I figured," he replies, his tone calm, steady, like he already knew the answer before he asked the question, and she folds her arms lightly, leaning against the shelf. "Then why ask for it?" she asks, not accusing, just curious. And there is a brief pause before he answers, the kind of pause that feels like he is choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes you just want to know if something still exists," he says. And she blinks, caught off guard by how simple that sounds and how heavy it feels at the same time. And she lets out a small breath. "That is a strange reason to come to a library this late," she says, and he gives a faint smile, barely there. "Libraries are quiet," he replies. "People leave you alone here." And she studies him for a second longer, noticing the way his shoulders relax just slightly, like he means it, like this place matters more to him than it should, and something in her chest shifts, something familiar, because she knows that feeling too well, the need for a place that does not ask questions, and without thinking too much about it, she gestures toward a small table tucked between the shelves. "You can sit there if you want," she says. "I still have to finish closing, but you can stay a little longer." Even though that breaks another rule, even though she knows she should not, and he hesitates for just a second before nodding, walking over and pulling out the chair. Slowly, like he is not used to being offered things without conditions, and she turns to leave, but stops halfway, glancing back at him. "Do you want some tea?" she asks, surprising even herself, because they do not usually offer that, not officially, and he looks up, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face before he answers, "That would be nice." And as she walks back toward the front desk, her mind drifts for a moment, wondering why she feels like she just let a stranger into more than just a building, while behind her, the man sits quietly under the dim light, his gaze lowering to the table, his fingers brushing against the worn surface as if grounding himself. And for the first time that night, the silence does not feel empty anymore. It feels like the beginning of something neither of them can see yet. The kettle clicks softly as the water finishes heating, and Emily pours it into a chipped ceramic mug, watching the steam curl upward like something alive, something fragile, and for a second she just stands there, holding it, wondering why she is doing this for someone she does not even know. But her feet move anyway, carrying her back through the quiet aisles until she reaches him again, still sitting at the small table, exactly where she left him, his posture relaxed but his eyes distant, like he is somewhere else entirely, and she sets the mug down gently in front of him. "Careful, it is hot," she says, her voice softer now, and he nods once, wrapping his hands around the cup as if he needs the warmth more than the drink itself. And there is a moment where neither of them speaks, just the faint hum of the lights and the quiet ticking of the clock somewhere in the distance. And then he finally looks up, meeting her eyes for the first time without hesitation. "You do this often?" he asks, glancing slightly at the tea, and she shrugs, leaning against the edge of the table. "Not really," she admits. "Only when someone looks like they need it." And his expression shifts just enough for her to notice, something unreadable passing through his gaze before he looks back down at the cup. "And what makes you think I need it?" he asks quietly, and she lets out a small breath, half a smile forming without effort. "You came in here looking for a book that does not exist," she says. "That usually means something." And he almost smiles at that. Almost, but it fades just as quickly as it appears, and he takes a slow sip of the tea, like he is buying time, like he is deciding how much to say. "What if I just like the quiet?" he replies, and she nods, not arguing, because she understands that too well. The way silence can feel safer than answers, and she pushes herself off the table slightly, crossing her arms as she studies him for a moment longer. "Then you picked the right place," she says. "This building is practically invisible after midnight." And that word seems to catch his attention. Invisible, because he looks up again, sharper this time. "Invisible," he repeats under his breath, and she nods. "People forget places like this exist," she says. "They forget people too." And the air shifts again, subtle but real, like something deeper just brushed the surface. And for a second she wonders if she said too much, if she crossed some invisible line. But he does not pull away, does not shut down. Instead, he leans back slightly in the chair, studying her now with the same quiet curiosity she has been giving him all night. "And you," he says slowly, "do you feel invisible too?" And the question lands heavier than she expects, because she does not answer right away, her gaze drifting past him to the endless rows of books, to the life she has been quietly holding together piece by piece. And then she exhales. "Sometimes," she admits, her voice barely above a whisper, "but at least here, it does not feel like a bad thing." And he watches her carefully, like he is memorizing that answer, like it matters more than it should. And for the first time since he walked in, something shifts between them, something real, something unspoken but understood, and neither of them notices how much time has passed until the clock chimes softly again, reminding her she should have locked the doors already, reminding her that this night is not supposed to last, and yet neither of them moves to end it. Not yet. Not when it feels like they have only just begun. The clock chimes again, softer this time, like it is reminding her of something she is choosing to ignore, and Emily straightens slightly, brushing her hands against her sleeves as she exhales. I should close up, she says, though her voice lacks urgency, and he nods. Not surprised, not disappointed, just accepting, like he expected the moment to end sooner or later, and yet neither of them moves right away. The silence stretching again, but no longer uncomfortable, no longer empty, just shared, and she turns slightly, glancing toward the front desk, mentally running through the checklist she has repeated every night for the past 2 years. Lights, doors, system shutdown, routine that keeps everything in place, that keeps her life from slipping further than it already has. But tonight the routine feels distant, like something she is watching instead of doing. And when she looks back at him, he is already standing, gently pushing the chair back into place as if he does not want to disturb anything, as if he respects the quiet more than most people ever do. And that small detail makes her pause, makes her notice him differently. You do not come here often, she says, more statement than question, and he shakes his head once. No, he replies, slipping his hands into the pockets of his damp coat. Not usually. And there is something unfinished in the way he says it, something that suggests this night is not accidental, and she studies him for a moment longer before asking, then why tonight? And he hesitates, just long enough for the truth to feel close. But instead he gives a simple answer. I needed somewhere quiet, he says, and she nods slowly, because she knows that answer is real, even if it is not complete. And she steps past him, heading toward the front, trusting that he will follow. And he does, his footsteps measured, unhurried, matching the pace she sets. And when they reach the desk, she moves behind it again, typing in the shutdown sequence, the screen flickering as the system begins to close. And for a brief second she glances at him, noticing the way he watches everything, the way his eyes take in details most people ignore, the layout, the exits, the small imperfections. And something about that feels different, like he is used to being aware of everything around him, like this is not new to him. And the thought lingers just long enough to make her curious, but not enough to ask. And as the final system prompt disappears, she reaches for the keys, stepping toward the front door, unlocking it just enough to let him out, the cold night air slipping in immediately, brushing against her face, and he pauses at the threshold, turning back slightly, his expression softer now, less guarded than when he first walked in. Thank you, he says, and she shrugs lightly, leaning against the doorframe. It was just tea, she replies, but he shakes his head, a faint smile forming. It was more than that, he says quietly, and for a moment she does not know what to say, because she feels it too, something small but real, something she cannot quite name. And he steps out into the night, the dim streetlight catching the edges of his silhouette as he walks away without looking back. And she watches him for a second longer than she should before, closing the door, locking it with a soft click. And as she turns off the last light, the building falling back into darkness, she tells herself it was just another shift, just another stranger, just another quiet night. But the empty chair at the back of the library feels different. Now, like something is missing, and for the first time in a long time, Emily Carter leaves work thinking not about bills or exhaustion, but about a man who asked for a book that does not exist, and why it suddenly feels like she wants to find it for him. Emily tells herself she will not think about him again. But the next night at 10:58 p.m., as she flips the sign to open late, her eyes drift to the glass doors anyway, almost expecting nothing and somehow still hoping. And she shakes her head at herself, focusing on the stack of returned books waiting to be sorted, her hands moving automatically. Muscle memory taking over while her mind wanders back to a quiet voice asking for something that does not exist, and she catches herself pausing too long on a single page, exhaling before pushing the thought away, because she does not have time to get distracted, not when her phone buzzed that morning with a reminder about rent, not when her bank balance is still sitting under $50, not when everything in her life depends on staying practical, staying grounded, staying focused. And yet when the clock clicks past 11:03 p.m., the same minute as last night, the door creaks open again, and her head lifts instantly before she can stop herself, her heart reacting faster than logic. And there he is, stepping inside like he never left, like this place somehow belongs to him now. And for a second, she just watches him, the familiarity of his presence settling into the room as naturally as the silence itself. And he gives a small nod, not quite a greeting but close enough, and she feels a faint smile tug at her lips before she can hide it. "You came back," she says, her tone lighter than she expected, and he pauses just inside the door, glancing around briefly before meeting her eyes again. "I was hoping it would still be quiet," he replies, and she leans slightly against the desk, crossing her arms as she tilts her head. "It usually is," she says, then adds after a beat. "Especially for people looking for books that are not in the system." And this time he actually smiles, small but real, like the joke landed somewhere deeper than it should have. And he walks closer, his step steady, unhurried, stopping at the same spot as the night before. Like an unspoken pattern has already formed, and for a moment neither of them mentions it. Neither of them questions why he returned or why she is not surprised, and instead she gestures toward the back again. "Your table is still there," she says, and he glances past her, then back. A flicker of something softer in his expression, something almost like relief. "Good," he says quietly. And as he moves past her once more, she notices it again. The way he carries himself, calm but alert, like he is always aware of everything around him. And it makes her wonder, briefly, what kind of life teaches someone to move like that? What kind of world he comes from? But she does not ask, not yet, because something about the quiet between them feels too fragile to push. And instead she watches him disappear into the shelves again, the same path as before, the same corner, the same seat. And as she returns to her desk, she realizes something she did not expect, something she cannot quite explain. The library does not feel invisible tonight. It feels like it is waiting, like it is holding space for something that has only just begun. And for the first time in a long time, Emily Carter is not counting the hours until her shift ends. She is wondering what will happen next. The minutes passed differently that night, slower in the quiet but somehow lighter, and Emily finds herself listening for the soft shift of movement between the shelves instead of watching the clock, her fingers pausing over the keyboard more often than they should, her attention drifting toward the back where she knows he is sitting. And after a while she gives in, pushing herself up from the chair and walking down the familiar path again, past rows of books that feel less like barriers now and more like witnesses, until she sees him leaning slightly forward at the table, a book open in front of him this time, though she knows he did not bring one with him, and she tilts her head as she steps closer. "That one actually exists," she says lightly, and he looks up, a faint smile returning as if he expected her to come. "I took your advice," he replies, tapping the worn cover gently, and she glances at the title, something old, something forgotten, and she nods. "It is not popular," she says, "but sometimes those are better." And he watches her for a moment, like he is weighing that answer against something else, something unspoken, before he asks, "Do you read all of them?" Gesturing slightly toward the endless shelves, and she lets out a quiet breath, shaking her head. "I wish," she admits, "but mostly I just keep them in order." And there is a brief pause before she adds, softer, "It is easier that way." And he studies her again, the same quiet intensity from before. "Easier than what?" he asks, and she hesitates, her gaze drifting to the book in his hands, to the idea of stories that can be finished, that have endings. "Easier than thinking about everything else," she says finally, and he nods slowly, like that answer makes sense to him, like it fits somewhere in his own world. And for a moment they sit in that understanding, the silence no longer empty but shared again, until he closes the book gently, not because he is finished, but because something else matters more. "If you could change one thing," he says, his voice quieter now, more deliberate. "Not fix it, just change it. What would it be?" And the question catches her off guard, because it feels too direct, too close to something she does not usually let herself think about, and she shifts her weight slightly, crossing her arms as she considers it, her mind instinctively going to practical things, bills, rent, stability, but none of those feel like the real answer, not the one he is asking for. And after a long second, she exhales, "I would make this place stay open," she says, surprising even herself. "Not just at night. All the time. For people who need somewhere to go." And she gestures lightly around them. Somewhere they do not feel invisible. and the word lingers between them again. Heavier this time, and he does not respond right away, his expression shifting. Subtly, something deeper surfacing in his eyes, something thoughtful, almost conflicted, like her answer just connected to something he was not expecting. And when he finally speaks, his voice is softer than before. That would cost a lot, he says, not dismissing, just stating a fact, and she shrugs, a small, almost self-conscious smile appearing. Yeah, she admits, that is why it is just a thought. And he watches her a second longer, like he is memorizing that moment, like it matters more than it should, and then he leans back slightly, his gaze drifting briefly around the room before returning to her. Sometimes thoughts are the only place things start, he says quietly, and she does not know why that sentence stays with her, why it feels different from everything else he has said, but it does, settling somewhere deeper than logic. And as she steps back toward the front desk, leaving him with the book again, Emily Carter does not realize she just shared the one thing that matters most to her, with the one person who might be able to change everything. The question she shared lingers in the air long after she returns to the front desk, echoing quietly between the ticking seconds and the low hum of the lights, and Emily tries to shake it off, tries to fall back into routine, but her thoughts keep circling back to the same moment, the way he listened, the way he did not dismiss it, and she exhales slowly, focusing on the small tasks in front of her until another 10 minutes pass, and she hears it, the soft sound of a chair moving, footsteps approaching, and when she looks up, he is standing there again, closer this time, his expression calm but different, more deliberate, like he has decided something, and he rests one hand lightly against the edge of the desk. "Can I ask you something else?" he says, and she nods without hesitation, though she is not sure why. "Sure," she replies, and he glances down briefly, almost like he is choosing his words again, before meeting her eyes. "If someone offered to help you with all of it," he says, his voice quiet but steady, "the rent, the stress, everything you are carrying, would you take it?" And the question lands heavier than anything he has asked before, because it is not abstract anymore. It is not about books or ideas. It is about her life, her reality, and she stiffens slightly, her arms crossing instinctively as she leans back just enough to create space. "That depends," she says carefully, and he tilts his head slightly, waiting. "On what?" he asks, and she studies him. Now, really studies him, noticing the way his gaze does not waver, the way he seems genuinely interested in her answer, not testing, not judging, just listening, and it makes her uneasy in a way she cannot quite explain. "On why they are offering," she says finally, her voice steady but guarded. "People do not just fix things for you without expecting something back." And he nods slowly, like he expected that answer, like it confirms something for him. "And if they did not expect anything," he presses gently, and she lets out a quiet breath, shaking her head slightly. "That is not how the world works," she says, a faint edge of reality in her tone. "There is always a reason." And he watches her for a moment longer, his expression unreadable, but there is something behind it now, something deeper, something almost conflicted, and for the first time since he walked in, she feels it clearly, the sense that he is not just asking questions, he is measuring something, weighing something, and it makes her shift slightly, her curiosity sharpening. "Why are you asking me that?" she says, her voice softer but more direct, and he hesitates, just for a second, before giving a simple answer. "Because I wanted to know what you would say." And she holds his gaze, not fully convinced, not fully dismissing it either, and after a moment she relaxes just enough to uncross her arms. "Well, now you know," she says quietly, and he nods once, stepping back slightly as if giving her space again, as if he knows he has pushed just enough, and for a brief second neither of them speaks, the silence settling back into place, but it feels different now, charged in a way it was not before, like something invisible just shifted between them. And as he turns to walk back toward the shelves, leaving her standing there with a question she cannot quite answer, Emily Carter realizes something she has not let herself think until now. She does not just wonder who he is, she wonders why it suddenly feels like he already knows more about her life than he should. The rest of the night feels different after that question, like the air itself has shifted into something heavier, something neither of them fully acknowledges, and Emily tries to return to her routine again, but her focus slips more than before, her eyes drifting toward the back every few minutes, wondering if he will come up again, wondering if he will ask something else she is not ready to answer. And when nearly 20 minutes pass without movement, she exhales slowly, telling herself it does not matter, that he is just another visitor, just another quiet stranger passing through. But just as she starts to believe it, she hears footsteps again, slower this time, more deliberate, and when she looks up, he is not empty-handed, the same worn book still in his grip, but his expression is different now, more resolved, like he has reached some kind of conclusion, and he stops at the desk again, placing the book down gently between them. "I think I understand something now," he says, and she raises an eyebrow slightly, leaning forward just enough to show she is listening. "About what?" she asks, and he glances down at the cover before answering. "About why this place matters," he says quietly, and she folds her arms again, not defensive this time, just steady. "It is just a library," she replies, though her voice carries more meaning than the words suggest, and he shakes his head slightly. "No," he says, his tone firm but calm. "It is more than that to you." And the way he says it makes her pause, because he is not guessing. He is stating it like a fact, and she studies him again, trying to understand how he keeps getting so close to the truth without her telling him everything. "You are very observant for someone who just walked in here 2 nights ago," she says, half teasing but not entirely. And he lets out a small breath, almost a quiet laugh. "I have had practice," he replies, and there is something in that answer that feels layered, like there is more behind it than he is willing to say. And she leans back slightly, watching him more carefully now, her curiosity sharpening into something more focused. "What kind of practice?" she asks, and for a moment it seems like he might answer, like he might finally give her something real about himself. But instead he looks past her briefly, his gaze flicking toward the empty space of the library, like he is reminding himself of something. And when he looks back at her, his expression has shifted again, more guarded, the kind that teaches you what people value. He says simply, and she nods slowly, though that answer raises more questions than it resolves, and the silence stretches again. But this time it feels different, not just shared but charged, like something important is just out of reach, and she glances at the book between them, tapping the cover lightly. "So did you find what you were looking for?" she asks, and he follows her gaze, his fingers resting briefly on the worn edges. "Not exactly," he admits, "but I think I found something better." And when he says it, his eyes lift to meet hers, holding the look just long enough to make her feel it, the weight behind those words, the intention she cannot quite name, and she looks away first, her breath catching just slightly before she recovers, pushing herself upright again. "That is a bold statement for someone who still does not have a library card," she says, trying to lighten the moment, and he smiles faintly, reaching into his coat pocket before pausing, his hand lingering there for just a second, like he is considering something, and then he pulls it out empty, as if he changed his mind. "Maybe I will get one next time," he says, and she nods, though something about that moment sticks with her, the hesitation, the choice not to show whatever he almost reached for. And as he steps back again, returning toward the shelves one more time, Emily Carter feels it clearly now, stronger than before. The sense that this man is not just passing through her life. He is moving towards something deliberate, something she does not fully understand yet. And for the first time since he walked into the library, she starts to wonder not just who he is, but what he is planning to do next. The rest of the shift stretches into something neither fast nor slow, just suspended, like time itself has decided to wait with them. And Emily tries to focus on closing tasks again, but her mind keeps circling back to the same detail. The way his hand paused inside his coat pocket, the way he chose not to show whatever was there, and that small moment lingers more than it should, because it felt intentional, like a decision made in real time. And she exhales slowly, telling herself she is overthinking, that he is just a stranger, but the feeling does not leave, not even when the clock creeps closer to midnight and the quiet deepens into something almost heavy. And after a while she hears movement again, not footsteps this time, but the soft sound of a book closing. And when she looks up, he is already walking toward her, the same calm pace, the same steady presence. But there is something different in the way he carries himself now, something more certain, like he has reached the end of something she cannot see, and he stops at the desk one last time, his gaze meeting hers without hesitation. "I should go," he says, and she nods, though the words land with a strange weight, like something is ending before she is ready for it. "Yeah," she replies quietly. "We are closing anyway." And for a brief moment neither of them moves, the silence stretching again, but this time it feels final, like the kind of silence that comes right before. Something changes, and he reaches into his coat pocket again, slower this time, more deliberate, and for a second she wonders if he is finally going to show her what he held back before. But instead he pulls out something small, placing it gently on the desk between them, and she looks down, expecting a card, maybe a note, but it is just a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges like it has been carried for a while. And she glances up at him, her brows narrowing slightly. "What is this?" she asks, and he shakes his head lightly, a faint smile touching his expression. "Something I found a long time ago," he says. "I think it belongs here more than it belongs with me." And she hesitates for a second before reaching for it, her fingers brushing against the paper, feeling its weight, its texture, something about it unexpectedly personal, and she unfolds it slowly, her eyes scanning the page, and her breath catches just slightly when she realizes what it is, a handwritten note, simple, uneven, like it was written years ago, and at the bottom, in small letters, a line that stands out more than anything else. A place where no one feels invisible. And she freezes, her gaze lifting back to him, confusion and recognition mixing in. Her expression, "This," she starts, but the words do not come easily, because it feels too close, too familiar, too connected to what she said earlier, and he watches her carefully, his expression softer now, almost vulnerable in a way she has not seen before. "You said something tonight," he says quietly, "about what you would change," and she nods slowly, still holding the paper, still trying to understand how this connects. And he takes a small step back, giving her space again, like he always does. "Keep it," he adds, his voice steady but low, "in case you ever forget why it matters." And she looks down at the note again, her fingers tightening slightly around it, the weight of the moment settling in deeper than she expected. And when she looks back up, he is already turning toward the door, his silhouette catching the dim light as he walks away without another word. And this time she does not stop him, does not call out, does not ask the questions building in her mind, because something tells her it would not change anything, not yet. And as the door closes behind him, the quiet returns again, but it does not feel the same anymore. Not when there is something in her hands that was never supposed to be there. Not when the words on that page feel like they were written just for her. And standing alone behind the desk, Emily Carter realizes something she cannot ignore anymore. This man did not just come into her life by accident, and whatever he is doing, it has only just begun. Emily does not sleep much that night, not because of noise or stress or the usual weight of overdue bills, but because of a single piece of paper resting on the small table beside her bed, unfolded, reread, turned over more times than she can count, the words still echoing in her mind as if they were spoken instead of written. A place where no one feels invisible, and she stares at it in the dim glow of her phone screen, trying to remember when she might have seen it before, trying to understand how something so personal could exist outside of her own thoughts. And by the time morning light slips through the thin curtains, she has not found an answer, only more questions, and she carries them with her through the day, through the routine of cheap coffee and long bus rides, and the quiet exhaustion that never quite leaves her shoulders, until night comes again, and she finds herself standing outside the library doors a few minutes before her shift, her fingers tightening slightly around the strap of her bag, her eyes flicking to the reflection in the glass like she is checking for something she cannot name. And when she steps inside, the familiar hum greets her, steady and unchanged. But something feels different, like the space is holding on to something from the night before, and she moves through her opening routine more slowly this time, more aware, her gaze drifting more often to the entrance than to her tasks. And when the clock ticks past 11, she is already watching the door, already expecting the soft creak, already listening for footsteps that do not come, and the minutes stretch longer than they should, the silence settling back into its old shape, emptier now than it felt before. And she tells herself it should not matter, that he said nothing about coming back, that she does not even know his name, but the absence still feels louder than his presence ever did, and she exhales, forcing herself to focus. Pushing the thought away as she begins sorting returns again, her hands moving faster now, almost like she is trying to outrun the feeling, until a voice breaks through the quiet, sharp and unfamiliar. Emily. And she looks up immediately, startled by the sound of her own name in this place. Her eyes landing not on him, but on her supervisor standing near the entrance, clipboard in hand, expression unusually tense, and her stomach tightens slightly, because that tone never means anything good, and she steps out from behind the desk. "Yeah," she replies, her voice steady but cautious, and her supervisor walks closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel more serious. "There is going to be a meeting tomorrow morning," she says. "City funding review." And Emily nods slowly, already feeling where this is going, already sensing the shift before it is spoken out loud. And then it comes, simple, direct, heavier than anything else that night. They are talking about closing this branch, and the words hit harder than she expects, not because she did not see it coming, but because hearing it out loud makes it real, and she blinks once, her grip tightening slightly at her sides. "Closing," she repeats, and her supervisor nods. "Low traffic, budget cuts, same reasons as always," she says, her tone practical, almost detached, like she has already accepted it. But Emily is not yet, because her mind flashes back to the note, to the words, to the conversation that felt like it mattered, and for a moment she cannot tell if it was coincidence or something else entirely. And as her supervisor walks away, leaving her standing there in the middle of the quiet library, Emily Carter looks toward the back shelves where he used to sit, the empty chair now feeling like a missing piece instead of just furniture, and she realizes something she did not want to admit. Whatever connection started in this place might be ending before she even understands what it was. And for the first time since he walked through those doors, she wonders if he is not coming back, or if he already knows something she does not. The words do not leave her, not even as the night stretches forward and the library returns to its quiet rhythm, because now every shelf, every empty chair, every flicker of light feels temporary, like it is already halfway gone, and Emily moves through her shift with a different kind of awareness, slower, more deliberate, her fingers brushing the edges of books as if memorizing them, as if holding on to something that might not be there much longer. And every time she glances toward the door, there is nothing, no movement, no familiar silhouette, just the reflection of her own tired expression staring back at her. And she tells herself again that it should not matter, that he was just someone passing through, but the note in her pocket feels heavier with every passing minute, like it is pulling her attention back to something she cannot ignore, and eventually she takes it out again, unfolding it carefully on the desk, her eyes tracing the words one more time, searching for something she missed, some clue, some explanation, but it is still just the same simple sentence, the same quiet promise, and yet it feels different now, like it is connected to something larger, something just out of reach, and she exhales slowly, folding it again, slipping it back into her pocket as she leans back in her chair, staring up at the ceiling for a second longer than she should, until the sound of her phone vibrating breaks through the silence, sharp and unexpected, and she reaches for it instinctively, her screen lighting up with a notification she almost ignores until she catches the headline, bold, unavoidable, Hayes Industries CEO to announce major city investment tomorrow, and her breath stills for just a second, her thumb hovering over the screen. Before she taps it open, her eyes scanning the article quickly, piecing together details that feel distant and yet strangely close. A name, Daniel Hayes, a photograph beneath it, clean-cut, composed, wearing a tailored suit that looks nothing like the man who sat quietly in the back of her library. And for a moment her mind refuses to connect the two images, refuses to bridge the gap between what she saw and what she is seeing now. But the longer she looks, the harder it becomes to deny. The same eyes, the same expression, just sharper, more defined, like the version of him she never saw. And her grip tightens slightly around the phone as realization settles in slowly, heavily, piece by piece, and she leans forward, setting the phone down on the desk as if it suddenly weighs too much, her thoughts racing back through every conversation, every question, every moment that felt slightly off, slightly intentional. And it all starts to shift, to realign into something she was never supposed to see this way. And her chest tightens, not from shock alone, but from something deeper, something that feels like understanding arriving too late. And she lets out a quiet breath, shaking her head slightly as if that might undo it, as if it might make it less real. But it does not, because the truth is already there, sitting in front of her in clear, undeniable detail. And she glances toward the empty back table again. The place where he sat, the place where he listened, the place where he asked questions that now feel entirely different. And for the first time since he walked through those doors, Emily Carter understands something she cannot unsee. He was never just a quiet visitor. He was the one person who could decide whether this place lives or disappears, and suddenly every word he said feels like it had a purpose. Every moment feels like it was leading somewhere. And as she sits there in the dim light of the library, the note still folded in her pocket, Emily realizes with a quiet, sinking certainty, tomorrow is not just a meeting, it is a decision that could change everything. The night after the article feels longer than any shift Emily has ever worked, not because of the silence, but because of what now fills it, 1,000 small realizations clicking into place every time she looks around the room, every time she remembers the way he stood, the way he asked questions that suddenly feel less like curiosity and more like intent, and she moves slower than usual. Her thoughts no longer scattered, but focused on one thing, one truth she cannot ignore. Daniel Hayes was never lost. He was looking, and maybe he was looking at her the entire time. And the idea sits heavy in her chest as she locks up at the end of her shift, stepping out into the cool night air with the folded note still in her pocket, her fingers brushing against it like it might anchor her to something real. And she does not sleep much again, not when morning comes too quickly, not when the meeting is no longer just an idea but a moment that is about to happen whether she is ready or not. And when she stands outside the municipal building the next day, the contrast hits her immediately. Glass walls, polished floors, people in tailored suits moving with purpose, a world that feels completely separate from the quiet corners of her library. And she hesitates for a second before stepping inside, her worn shoes echoing faintly against the floor, her reflection catching in the glass panels around her, reminding her just how out of place she looks here. But she keeps walking anyway. Because this matters, because something inside her refuses to stay invisible this time. And when she enters the conference room, it is already half full, city officials, investors, people speaking in low, controlled tones, and she stays near the back, her hands clasped together as she scans the room, her heart beating just a little faster with every second that passes. Until the doors open again and the conversation shifts almost instantly, the energy in the room tightening as he walks in. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just quiet authority, dressed in a tailored suit that fits him perfectly, his posture straight, his presence commanding in a way she has never seen before. And for a moment she cannot reconcile the image in front of her with the man who sat in the dim light of her library, holding a chipped mug of tea. And yet it is him, unmistakably, undeniably him. And her breath catches just slightly as he takes his place at the front of the room, his gaze sweeping briefly across the crowd before settling forward, professional, composed, distant in a way he never was with her. And the meeting begins, voices discussing numbers, budgets, projections, words that blur together as she watches him instead, trying to find some trace of the person she spoke to, some sign that those nights meant something beyond a passing curiosity. And then, in the middle of a sentence, his eyes shift, just for a second, scanning the room again, and they land on her, and everything else fades. For that brief moment, the noise, the movement, the distance between them, and she sees it clearly, the recognition, the flicker of something real breaking through the composed surface, and it is gone almost as quickly as it appears, replaced by the calm focus of someone used to being watched, used to being in control, and she feels something tighten in her chest. Not anger, not confusion, something more complicated. Something that feels like understanding and disappointment colliding at the same time, because now she knows, every question he asked, every moment he listened, every choice he made, it all led to this room, to this decision. And as she stands there among strangers in a world that was never meant for her, Emily Carter realizes something that changes everything. She is not just waiting to hear what he will decide. She is about to find out whether any of it was real at all. The room falls into a quiet that feels heavier than before, not empty but expectant, every voice fading as Daniel Hayes steps forward, his presence alone enough to hold the attention of everyone in the room. And Emily stands still at the back, her hands tightening slightly as she watches him, waiting for something she cannot fully define, waiting for a sign that the man she met in the library still exists somewhere beneath the polished surface in front of her. And when he begins to speak, his voice is calm, measured, every word clear and deliberate. "This city does not need another investment," he says, and a ripple of confusion moves through the room, subtle but immediate, and Emily feels her breath catch just slightly, her eyes fixed on him as he continues. "It needs a reason to believe that what we build is meant for people, not just profit." And there is a shift now, a subtle change. In tone, something less corporate, more personal, and she feels it before she understands it. The way his words begin to sound familiar, the way they echo something she has heard before, something she said, and he pauses for just a second, his gaze lifting again, scanning the room until it finds her once more, and this time he does not look away, not immediately. "I spent the last few nights in a place most people have already forgotten," he continues, his voice steady but softer now. "A place that does not generate revenue, does not attract attention, does not show up on any report that would justify its existence." And the room is completely silent now. Every person listening, every movement stilled, and Emily feels her heart beating faster, because she knows where this is going before he says it. She knows what he is about to do. And when he speaks again, the words land with a weight that changes everything. "And yet it matters more than anything we are planning to replace it with," he says, and there is no hesitation in his voice now, no uncertainty, just certainty that fills the space completely. "So we are not closing it." And the reaction is immediate, a low murmur spreading through the room, surprise, confusion, questions already forming, but Emily hears none of it, because her focus is locked on him, on the meaning behind those words, on the quiet truth she is finally beginning to understand. And he continues, his tone firm again, professional but unwavering. "We are expanding it," he says, "funding extended hours, community programs, open access initiatives, everything it needs to become what it was always meant to be." And he pauses once more, just long enough for the room to absorb it, for the weight of the decision to settle, and then his gaze shifts again, softer now, more personal. "A place where no one feels invisible," he finishes, and this time the words are not just a statement, they are a promise, and Emily feels something in her chest loosen, something she did not realize she was holding on to, because now she understands, not just what he decided, but why. And the room erupts into conversation again, voices overlapping, questions rising, but she remains where she is, unmoving, her eyes still on him as he steps back. The moment passing for everyone else, but not for her, not when everything just changed in a way she did not expect. And as the meeting begins to shift into discussion, into details and logistics, he moves away from the center, his attention briefly pulled in another direction. And that is when she turns, quietly stepping out of the room before anyone can stop her, before the moment can become something else. And when she reaches the hallway, the noise fading behind her, she exhales slowly, her fingers brushing against the folded notes still in her pocket, grounding herself in something real, something that started all of this. And for a second, she just stands there, trying to process everything, until she hears footsteps behind her, steady, familiar, and she turns, already knowing who it is before she sees him. And when their eyes meet again, there is no distance this time, no separation between who he was and who he is, just the truth of both standing in front of her at once. And for a moment neither of them speaks, because they do not need to. Not yet. Not when everything that matters has already been said. And Emily Carter realizes something she never expected when she first took that late shift. Sometimes the person who walks into your life quietly is the one who changes it the loudest.